Okay, welcome everybody to our week 3 session. I'll do the roll towards the end of the lesson today. But first up, so this class covers construction sequencing. So we're not really getting fully into the materials just yet. But we'll be getting into starting with concrete I think next week, and then building our way up from there. So basically, this course follows that process of starting with all the stuff you do before you start building, then getting into that site preparation type stuff, and then footings, and then working our way up. Typically, as building designers, we actually work the other way. We actually think about what's happening with our rooms and consequently with our roof, and then we design down. So we think about the structure we want, and then how do we support that. But an important part of this whole process is actually the planning and the scheduling of materials and trades, etc., and all the activities that happen on site. And so that's what we're going to do this morning before we actually even get into the lecture. Just have a crack at what processes and how long that would take for us to build a very standard 3-bedroom brick veneer house on a very, how do I say it, on a flat site, unremarkable site. So if you can think about that, so your standard sort of dwelling that you would see in a residential subdivision. So any ideas from any of you? And I'm gonna do this completely from what you guys say. So you will have to contribute if we're going to get this house built and scheduled. So what's the first thing we're going to do on that site? Survey it. Okay. All right. How long is that going to take? How long will it take? Given it's a fairly unremarkable site, yeah. Any ideas?
A day.
A day?
It should only take a couple of hours.
Take a couple of hours. So I've got a couple of hours, and I've got a week. So we'll go half a week. So I'll just drop a bit of colour into that one there. There we go. Right. Following our survey, what are we going to do on site? Depends what the survey turns up. No, we're talking about a very standard sort of 3-bedroom brick veneer house on a fairly unremarkable allotment of land. So that assumes things go.
You might go for a soil or sample test.
Mm-hmm.
Find out what's there.
Yep.
Need.
Okay. Are we going to be doing that in that same week as we're doing the site survey?
Should have been the first thing though.
Could have been, yeah, not necessarily. So, but that is a very good point. So yes, some people get soil samples done before they even purchase a block of land as well. But that's not the norm. And yes, it is incredibly important to get that information, get that confirmation, particularly around very difficult sites. But assuming this is a fairly unremarkable site.
You're assuming we've actually got a build design for the house to go on the site.
Yes, let's assume that. Let's assume we've got a design. So yep, soil samples. Yep. Right. I'm going to say that's happening in that same week. We're going to be doing our site survey. We're going to be doing our soil samples.
Mark out where the house goes in that, so that you're getting soil samples following the footprint of the house.
Yeah. Yeah. do that in our site survey. Okay, following our site survey and our soil samples.
Site preparation.
Site preparation, yeah. What sort of things do we do with the site preparation?
Well, the site's got to be level, it's compacted.
Yeah.
It's marked out for the footings.
Mm-hmm.
All the health, safety, regards to fencing and
Yeah.
possible marking of where the water and sewage go.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. How long is that going to take? When should we start that? Any takers? Was yeah, a week? Take a week? Yeah. Yeah. Site prep. Okay, so we've got things level, we've got some compacted fill, etc. We've got set up for our footings and things like that. We've got temporary fencing on the place. Then what do we do?
Oh, well, all the trenches get done.
Yeah, 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 excavation. Next week, is it? Following week? Okay, so we've dug trenches and things like that. Then what's the next thing we're going to do?
The plumber and the drainer come in.
Yeah. So, yeah, plumbing. Anything else that's going to be happening at that time? Formwork? Yeah, yeah. So we do plumbing and then formwork close to following after. Yeah, I'm fine with that. And that's going to happen in a week, is it? You've done a bit of that. You've done a bit of that plumbing, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It usually takes about like a week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Until you get the formwork on there as well, or a bit longer.
I think the formwork's like probably next week.
Formwork's the next week. All right. We can split those in. So our first fix plumbing. So we've got our formwork in place. What's the next thing that's going to happen?
Concrete slabs getting poured.
Yeah, yeah, concrete slabs going to get poured. In that process, we'll probably also phone the council as well. So formwork's in place, all the steel will be fixed. Then before any concrete goes in that, we phone the council as well. So we're at footings stage. If you want to inspect the steelwork before the concrete goes on top of it, it's the last chance to do so. So we let them know about that. So once we've got our slab poured, what are we going to do after that?
Wait for it to cure.
Yeah, yeah. No, that is a really important thing that actually often doesn't get missed by builders, but gets missed by students. So how long are we going to give it to cure?
Looks like 2 weeks in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah. How much they give it on site before the chippies arrive, or I guess you're well away by that time, aren't you? So yeah, you haven't, yeah. So it should be around the 8 to 10 days. Sometimes it happens after 5 or so. You've got to be very careful if you're pushing those boundaries, particularly if you're going to be fixing any sort of or any of your bottom plate fixings into your concrete slab, in that sort of time period, because the concrete hardens and it actually gains its how do I say it? It's designed strength at 28 days. So at 28 days, it is the strength it meets that strength that it's initially designed for. But for any of you who've been involved in concreting, you'd notice that you can pour concrete. It's very I would say very runny, malleable substance for a few hours, but then within that day, and it has to happen in that day, people can walk around on top of that slab by the afternoon to get the mechanical trowel on there to trowel off the surface. So our concrete's curing. So be diligent and give it a bit of time. Once we've given that bit of time to cure, what are we doing next?
Walls get put up.
Walls getting put up. Yeah.
There'll be all your site deliveries, all your timber be delivered, all your bricks will be delivered, ready to start the walls.
Yeah, and that can be affected by the particular site. Some sites can have all that stuff delivered all at one time. Other sites are a bit tight in regards, and that that differs between jobs. But yeah, so we get delivery of materials, and then we get our walls up. Should we call that first fix framing? All that?
Yeah.
Yep. Hey, got our first fix framing up, and that would include roof as well. So we do the whole bit all at once. What are we following on from that?
Roof framing.
Yeah, I'd say you combine all the roof framing and the wall framing in at one stage. For a lot of the standard builds that have a decent team of carpenters, they might throw up a frame in one day, but if not, they'll definitely get it done by the lunchtime of the second day, or for a very standard sort of place. So
Yeah, but in our area, I think what happens now, it's very common. The roof goes on, basically because of the weather.
yeah.
So even though the house is a long way from finished, they put the roof on pretty quick.
Yeah. So you get the roof on, and also get some isolation on the frame there as well to weatherproof things. With your first fixed framing, you're putting the windows in as well at that stage. So once you've got windows, roof, and isolation on, it's actually fairly can hold off a decent amount of weather. Not strong winds, of course, with unprotected isolation, but yeah, protects it all from the weather. So so we've got roof. Well, I'll chuck that in the same week because our first fix framing doesn't take long. Our roofing doesn't. Now that all depends. Okay, is it tiles and whatnot? And also another thing. So what else would we be doing at that stage?
Plumbing and electricity.
Yep. Plumbing.
All your cable lines should be going in.
Yep. In that same week, or are we going to push that out a little bit later?
They can work together.
Yep. Does it make a difference if it's tiles as opposed to sheet roof?
Yes, because it's much more difficult to get under a tin roof than it is tile roof.
Yeah, okay, yes, there's that. But also for anybody who's been on site while a roof is getting tiled, you probably wouldn't want to be doing anything else either. It can be pretty manic, cutting tiles, especially when you're doing the hips and whatnot, trimming stuff, chucking tiles down, whatever. Yeah, sheet roof goes up quite a bit quicker, and can be a little bit more conducive to other trades working around as well, a little bit safer. So, and that's as we'll cover later on in the lecture, that's also a consideration for anybody who's doing that scheduling to ensure that we don't have trades working consecutively that are putting other trades in danger or stopping them from doing their work. Because we don't want to pay for people to stand around and wait for a chance to get on site there as well. So yep, got our plumbing and electrical in. Then what do we do?
Start bringing in the chip rock.
Mm-hmm. Insulation and gyprock. All right.
Have a
Yeah.
some bricks on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I reckon I want to get.
I think I'd like some bricks on it.
Bricks on it. All right. I'm going to go. Yes. Roof plumbing. Yep. So does roof plumbing happen before the roofing or after the roofing? After the roof. Yeah.
Depends on the pitch of the roof, really.
It does, and roof typically a lot of roof plumbing happens in several stages as well, because you've got various different components of roof plumbing. It all depends on the roof, but with a lot of your standard roofs, the first thing to go up is actually the gutter. So you get your fascias on, then you get your gutters on, and then you start sending everything up from there, and ensure that you've got your holes cut out in your gutters for your pops as well. That's the bit that joins your downpipe on. So all that has to be that's done down the ground, and then they're sent up. So typically that happens before your roof covering goes on. So brickwork. We're going to be doing brickwork at that same point in time, or we're going to be doing it a bit after. We're going to have okay. No, I'm helping you too much.
I thought the walls were hanging up on now.
Well,
you know, you put your timber framing up, and the brick the brickwork would just about start straight after the guys have got the timber frame up.
Yeah, and that's still the point that we're at, because you know your roof covering can be happening at that time. Your second fix electrical and plumbing can be happening at that time. But consider we've got to get our pipes and things in place before our brick veneer. True? Or not? Yeah.
You can drill through brick.
Yeah. Okay.
Not the preferred option, but
What's that?
so not the most preferred option, but yeah. It just depends on who's doing the service.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brickwork, where's that going to take us to? Is it going to be all done in week 8 or week 9? Week 9.
Brickwork shouldn't take 2 weeks. And it's a pretty slow group.
Yeah. Okay.
I would have said I've watched 2-3 days as your average.
Yeah. So do you reckon chop off week 8 or week 9 out of that?
I'd chop. Personally, I'd probably have just under week 8.
Week 8. All right.
Personally, you could just about knock those out in 1 week if you put the trades one right.
Yep. Okay, so we've got that's right. Somebody mentioned. Oh, yeah. I won't lead you. So we've got brickwork. Then what have we got happening?
Should try for lock-up. Windows, doors.
Yeah.
Right, that'd be the next thing.
So
Rooms get covered.
rooms get covered.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, there was some mention of a few things earlier that I haven't put in just yet. I'm thinking about those things. But you're right about lock-up. Yeah. As well, but anything else? What's that? Turn them on. No. But yeah. So we'll have to get our insulation. So somebody mentioned that earlier. I can't put everything all in at one time, but yeah, we'd definitely.
you still be looking at doing other cabling like network cables and apart from the electricity and your water,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to decide what else has got to run through the timber frames.
Yeah, yeah.
So you know, you're basically just finishing what off all of those details like plumbing, cabling.
Yeah, I think we can include that in that
Yeah.
plumbing and the electrical there. So we'll get insulation happening. All right. When's that going to happen? Week 8, week 9?
When does the air conditioning go
What air conditioner are we going to use, do you think?
in? Yeah, you go for fully ducted.
Okay, fully ducted system. Well, we'd probably want that on the roof before our roof covering, wouldn't we? Yep. Possibly not all components of it. All right. I'll make some modifications. So drop that one down. Okay. I guess that's going to have to happen in week 8, isn't it? So very busy week 8. So insulation in place. What's going to follow insulation?
Because you've got all your services in the walls, yeah, you're going to, like if you've got all your plumbing, your electrical, your insulation,
Yeah.
you're going to put your doors on, lock it up, and put your chip rock in.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So lock up and internal
So
lining.
second
But
fix.
yeah. So but it sounds like our plumbing and electrical might carry over for a while. Is that correct? Give these guys a bit more time. Sounds like there's a lot of services going into this house.
This is
So
fast becoming the fastest built house in the world.
well, it is. Yeah. And and I'm thinking we've got a lot happening here in week 8. Like, yes, true. This is busy, right? Yeah, but I'm thinking maybe it's a little bit too week 8 centric myself.
Normally you're talking 20, the average spectator is about 26 weeks.
Is it? I think
most of the spectator builds were 26 weeks to build.
Yeah. For contingencies, but
Contingencies, but I mean, realistically,
Mm.
probably about 20 weeks is probably the norm.
Yeah. That's what I'll go with. Alright, so got our insulation. So we're doing jip rock and lock up. Lock up and linings. When's that happening?
Well, after all the jip rock, that's got to be finished. So windows and doors have to be in. So it's got to be up to a
Oh, so
lock-up
your windows will be in at your frame.
Yeah.
Frame
So
stage.
this is at a lock-up stage now.
Yeah.
So, well, I think you'd be putting in, starting to put in your laundry, bathroom tiles, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, but the question was, so we're doing our internal linings and hanging our external doors. When is that going to be happening?
10 to 11.
Yeah. Because we've still got some stuff happening with our plumbing and electricals, because we're getting some data cabling and this is just getting a bit busier. Yeah. So okay, so we've got internal linings in, got external doors hung. I think you mentioned something.
The bathroom tiles, the tiling.
Yeah, so we've got plumbing fitted into our walls, but then we've got a bunch of other things. Like the plumber will be back. That's for sure. Yeah, yeah, yes, it's certainly. Yeah. All right. I'll take the next suggestion I get. What's the next suggestion I get? Ceilings.
Ceiling one.
Yeah. Ceiling lining. At week week 10. Yep. Okay. What's happening after that?
Tiling.
Tiling.
And you're going to have wet area waterproofing. You're going to have to tile, so you're going to have that done.
All right.
Because that takes a few days to dry.
Yep. Wet area waterproofing. When's that going to be happening? Same week? Week 10?
I'd do it
10, 11?
You don't want someone walking out when you're doing it.
No, you certainly don't. No. So minimal disruption there. So wet area waterproofing. Then we've got tiling after that. Is that's
The second fix carpet.
yeah, yeah. I'm glad that's getting done. So second fix carpentry. Happening that same week or after?
Yeah, I would say so.
So yeah. So what sort of things does second fix carpentry involve?
Like the walls and like the skirting boards and that.
Yeah, 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 architraves and things like that, and that can depend on the floor coverings going in as well, etc. You know, so yeah, but we can be getting internal doors hung and things like that, and architraves on. Yep, and was it tiling? Is that the business? So is that floor tiling or wall tiling at this point in time?
Could be both.
Floor and wall.
Yeah,
What about appliances as well?
yeah, yeah. So in what order are we doing appliances, floor tiling, wall tiling? Are we doing wall tiling, appliances, floor tiling, appliances,
I
wall
would say
tiling?
appliances first.
Appliances
Wall
first,
tiling, yeah.
then wall tiling.
Yeah.
Yep. And then
Putting in hot water services, those sort of things, you want to know that's all sorted
Yeah,
with your plumbing and everything else before you're doing that.
yeah, okay. So let's call it PC items. So
Well, I wouldn't like the hot water. That wouldn't that go under the first fix of plumbing, like where it's got the plumbing and the electrical.
Not necessarily because
Yeah.
like when including it's outside water heaters around the outside and get knocked off.
yeah. No, that is exactly what I was going to say as well. So often, a lot of these more expensive, these more expensive primary cost items. So all the stuff. So PC items. That's all this. That's typically the items that people will have a bit more flexibility and choice about. So they'll go, okay, I want this cooktop, I want that underbed oven, I want this sort of hot water service, all that sort of stuff. So these are those other items that get brought into the building contract. Yeah, they get knocked off. People steal them when places are unsecured, etc. And it is, and it's an issue for construction that's part of why you see a lot more site fencing now around, like so fully fenced sites and whatever. That's also around safety and security. Yeah, and it's and on-site storage, secure storage on site as well. Yeah, shipping containers or also, yeah. So so certainly some of our PC items, because we're at lockup, right? We've got our external doors on. So are they those items being installed? Are they going to be happening during that second fix carpentry or after the second fix carpentry on this build?
After.
after. Within the next week. Yep. And then, oh, that's right. And then it was wall tiling after that.
Yeah.
You said floor and wall tiling. Yeah. Right. Typo. That's okay. Oh, fix it. Same week or week after or?
Yes, same week.
Same week. Yeah. All right. Then what are we gonna be doing?
Second fix plumbing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think all the final fit up in the roof, like the aircon, all the gas, all the switch panels on the walls, everything like that should be going in now.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's getting close to the final stages.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so we'll see our plumber and electrician back again. Right, going to be happening week 12, week 13. Any bids on that?
Next week.
Next week, week 13.
Yeah, go without a time over.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else we've got to do? Can we move in yet?
I think I hope that all the gutters and downpipes are down, sort of around the house, and most probably think about getting the drainer in to put the stormwater system in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
It's got to get painted as well.
yeah. So we'll get some. So what do we call it? Stormwater drainage.
Should have been connected to the sewer as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, stormwater drainage and sewer connections that happening in that same week as our other plumbing and electrical.
In theory, you've got to have your water connected to the property, and that should have happened
Yeah.
way back when. If it has, then that's fine. So then you can test everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we had our first fix plumbing. Yeah. All right. Same week or week after? Any bids on that?
Same week.
Same week.
The plumb's already there.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And then, oh, sorry, there was something else mentioned before.
House to get painted.
Painting. All right, when's that going to happen?
Probably the week after, or as soon as the plumbing and sparking are finished.
Okay, can we move in yet? Flooring? When's that going to happen?
After you finish painting.
Yeah. Can it happen in the same week or week after? Week after, we're going for?
So doesn't a locksmith have to come in and like install all the locks and doors and that?
That's already done when you've done lockup.
Yeah, done that at lockup.
Otherwise the house isn't secure.
Okay, so we've done painting, flooring. Can we move in yet?
You can. We did.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen people move in before some of those things as well. Yeah.
You haven't had your electricity connected yet.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just gets tested.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
At any point up to now, is there anyone that has to sign off on anything?
There are. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of signing offs that
You
you go
can't
through.
really continue until that signing off has been done?
Yeah, in a way. So what you have throughout that building process is a bunch of inspections. Well, you have inspections for council, and you notify council of at various different stages. But then you also have sign off for the bank as well to release more funds. That's the typical HIA residential contract that it's got inspection at completion of footings, inspection at framing, inspection at roof covering, internal linings, and then final inspection as well. For
It's requirement for insurance as well.
it is an requirement for insurance as well, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for what? Yeah. What sort of requirement for insurance?
Because
The
if you couldn't get the approval, it doesn't accept your house, it's safe to live in.
Oh right. Oh yes. Yes. Oh yeah, I get what you took. Yes. So that's So that's the certificate of occupancy. Yeah. So that's our final. That's our final thing. So we get a certificate of occupancy from the council that enables you, yes, to insure your house. Because if you don't get that, then the insurance companies don't want to touch you. So that's gonna cover all aspects, including things like in the Hills CFS access and yeah, council compliance and all those aspects. Thank you. So yeah, so we're gonna have some inspections. So yeah. Also at that point in time, actually, there is something. There's something that's been missed in this as well.
Landscaping.
Yeah, landscaping. Yeah. All right. Shall we? Yeah. So let's hold off on our final inspections. Let's try to get so get some landscaping done. When's that going to happen?
Oh, landscaping can happen any time, as we found out.
Right.
We've got a neighbour that's got carpet on the driveway that drive the car in on top of that. So landscaping most probably doesn't even come into the equation.
Unless it's a council or a state requirement, you've got to do something in a period of time.
Yeah.
Certain estates will operate and you've got to have landscape within a year of moving in. And that's actually the council requirement.
Yeah, and that's actually a fairly normal thing, that that encumbrance of landscaping to the front yard within a year. Yeah, but also
you have to check with the council, like there's encumbrances put on, so you've got to make sure you're fully aware of what you have to do.
yes, but it is also block specific. So a lot of these encumbrances are lodged upon titles as well. Yeah, so landscaping. The thing that holds up landscaping a bit though is that some of these I'm looking at linings, particularly, can be pretty messy trades, and
Yeah, you've got to have a big skip.
What's that?
You've got to have a big skip.
Yeah, so we've got a skip.
Right.
Yeah, so we've got a skip on site, but typically it's good to get your land. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, let's wait on the landscaping for a bit. So we'll do cleanup, which includes our skip. When's that going to happen? That this week or this week?
I'd say that week because you've still got to get your approvals.
Yeah. Yeah. So we get our cleanup, done a day or so. Landscaping. Any ideas on landscaping timelines?
Usually one of the requirements is just some sort of layout.
I think even the basic would take 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, your difficulty with that is in your paved areas. Your paved areas do take time, and certainly if you're doing concreted areas, formwork, curing, and all that sort of stuff. can happen in the build, can happen afterwards. It's that one I guess is a bit hard to pin down.
Take over 2 weeks.
Yeah. So we're doing some very basic landscaping, and then just by a whisker we get in on our 16-week mark. Now I reckon we've done pretty well building this house.
Yeah, except for the smart meter, 3-month wait.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So shift the whole thing back 3.
Yeah.
Another 12 weeks. All right. Cool. Well, I'm going to keep that one up there, and then we'll have a look and see how we went. So construction sequence. Getting from that to that. So this was our example one. It's not all too different. Okay, yeah, a little bit more, how do I say it, variability, flexibility in their spreadsheet. I just had, blocks like that, and so got some sections carried out. Things like structural carpentry, so they've got 2 weeks for doing that structural carpentry. I don't actually agree with that one myself. Well, brother's a carpenter, he's been a carpenter for a long time. I had a lot to do with him. In my involvement with him, that happens quite a bit quicker, and so on. So we can possibly quibble over certain things, but I think our timeline worked fairly well. Is there anything in there that we missed on ours?
That one's got metal for some reason.
Yeah, that's an odd one. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, so it might be balustrades and whatnot, but but a shoe may a fairly standard brick veneer house. Got some joinery and glazing happening in there as well. So, we mentioned fixing of PC ovens. We didn't mention the fixing in of cupboards, etc. All of our joinery.
Yeah, the final clean-up, isn't that sort of like a detail? Because they actually just make sure that all the windows are clean, and basically sort of do a real tizzy up on the places.
Yeah.
Pick off the stray little bits and pieces. It's just a final check, really.
Yes, yeah. So you do clean up, and then the builder will do the inspection, and then you have the walkthrough with the client. And I've never actually done a walkthrough myself, but I've seen the results of a walkthrough. Lots of those little circular red stickers. Stick them on walls. Yeah. So I've been into a few houses with a few red stickers about the place. And then the builder has the obligation to come back within that defects liability period and repair any of those things. But it's a very very important step just before handover that those things are addressed. So you do that walkthrough, and then and quite often at that stage you do the walkthrough, and then the bank valuer will come in after that and see all the red stickers and go, oh yeah, there's still some issues yet. Let's hold off on that final piece of funding before it's all signed off. And so that's some extra motivation there for the builder to rectify any of those issues promptly. So site identification. So we get there, make sure we don't build on the wrong allotment, and we look for everything. How we're going to be accessing the block, etc. Now some of that might have all happened initially already before we're doing our design process. Then we get temporary site facilities on, so some secure lockup for things. Doesn't happen on all sites, but on other sites we've got whole shipping containers. Each their own, site specific. One thing you will see on every site is a portable toilet. Hemloo. The toilet to the right is the sort you won't see anymore. So, not that I was working back then, but I was told that it used to be somebody with an auger on the back of a Land Cruiser or something like that come and just digs a big hole. First thing that happens on site, and then that sort of thing goes in. But that was a little bit before my time.
Yeah, is the electrical connection to the site sort of one of the things that's gone away because of all this tools, or don't they like it? Because in the old days, that was the first thing put on power, so the contractors can use their tools.
Yeah, and mains power to a site is still a very handy thing, but certainly yes, battery tools have changed a lot in that regard.
So you see a lot of trades with their own little gen sets sitting on the back of the unit.
Yep. And what so what we were doing, so with like on-site work that I used to do, started off corded power tools, which was I guess it's a bit of a nightmare in regards to testing and tagging all the time. To the point my dad just got his testing and tagging thing, so we just keep doing that tools all the time. Then it's about electrical hazards, so water and so on running power cords everywhere, and and the maintenance of the power cords and replacement of power cords because they get damaged a lot, and sometimes finding mains power as well.
In our case, in this one, we don't get power put to the site at the beginning.
You don't have to. It's a good idea to get power to the site in the beginning, particularly in rural areas where you won't have access to power for certain things, but you don't have to, because you do have a lot of battery gear, and then also air compressors and air run gear as well for things. So I'd say with our site we won't. So we won't get that temporary meter box set up there. So battery tools there's a whole bunch of motivations for going to battery tools. Then benching the site. So that involves taking off that layer of soil, the dark layer of soil that has all the humus in it, all the stuff that has all the organic matter in it. If you can keep it on site, that's fantastic, because that's great for gardens and things. It's going to make establishing your gardens so much better and easy. It's fantastic soil and takes thousands of years to make. But that's this bit here on the top of our. So everybody can see that darker portion to the soil there. So that's the one that's got all the organic matter in it. Any idea why we'd want to get rid of the soil that has organic matter in it? The building on?
It's going to disappear eventually.
Yeah. Well, all those three things combined. Yes, it breaks down. It disappears. The soil subsides. It compresses. You damage your footings as a result. So that soil is unstable. Then after removing that, if we need to bring it up to a certain height, we bring in fill and compactable fill, and compact that typically in 150 mil layers. Then building setup, as you mentioned earlier, so it can happen in a variety of different ways. Depends on what your obstacles are and how high you need to keep kegs and things like that. So it can be just some 10 mil rods hammered into the ground with string lines, or setups like this with timber hurdles on star drops, depending on what your site dictates. Yeah. And then excavation. Also what you're doing in part of this process. So you got string lines set out, but you're also spray marking everything as well, because you're not going to be able to excavate very easily around string lines. And string lines get disturbed. Following our excavation, our sanitary plumbing, our first fix plumbing. And then concrete slab footings as well. Top left-hand corner there. Does anybody know what type of slab that one is?
Waffle pod.
Waffle pod, yeah. Yeah. So that's a form of footing whereby essentially we're lifting the slab up further off the ground. That's really all that's happening in that regard. And I'll just quickly sketch the comparison here. So our standard slab, right? That's been excavated into the ground, and it's going to sit up 75 millimeters. So this is our ground hatching like that. Our waffle pod, that is simply a piece, these square bits of styrofoam that sit on top of our ground there, like that. So we're actually just picking the slab up off the ground a little bit, essentially. But you'll also notice that these waffle pods end up having a lot of beams inside there, internal beams that are much closer together than your standard beams. So your standard beams, for a very standard residential house, going to be around that 2 meter spacing. These ones are at 1200 spacing. So you end up getting quite a few more beams in there. But they're much smaller beams, and overall you end up being more efficient with your steel and your concrete with that sort of system than the trenches dug into the ground. Those systems do have their limitations, though. I can't think off the top of my head what soil reactivity they'll go up to, but they won't. You can't use them on really highly reactive soils.
We used them in the house I currently reside in.
Yeah.
Years ago, and actually, instead of being foam, they were cardboard.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Heavy duty cardboard. And and our soil, we've got 9 litres of sand.
Right.
Underneath us.
Yeah.
It was like, well, we didn't even, in seriousness, we just put some whole lot down and some active cardboard.
Yes, to give it actually a stable base for working on.
The cardboard down and then we poured the slab over that.
Yeah, and
The first system was actually cardboard.
Yeah.
The first time it was ever used was on the Festival Theatre. Peter Kookaroo, an engineer, came up with the idea.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. And then when all the concrete was set, they just flooded the whole part underneath and just washed out all the cardboard.
Right.
Incredible, clever guy.
Yeah.
That's why that was probably the last big project that came in on cost and on time.
Right.
Clever guys putting it together.
No, it's quite a legacy. So yes, as you mentioned, designed by Kookaroo or Peter Kookaroo Engineers, South Australia. Yeah, it's the South Australian design. Another thing about those waffle pods in relation to the limitations on soil reactivity. I was told by an engineer. Well, I just in informal chats with an engineer. They said because I was talking about building a reactive site, and they said, well, what about using waffle pods on screw piles as well? So which is screw piles? So
Screw pile, yeah.
yeah. So that's basically a steel rod, stainless steel rod with a little auger bit on the end that you've got your auger driver end on an excavator arm, and they screw those stainless steel posts down into the ground. So they can screw right down into the ground, and then you can build your waffle pod on top of them. And so it's something I'd seen a little bit about on the internet, but in actually researching that for myself, I couldn't find any engineers in the state that would say yes, you can do that on a highly reactive site. So there's some ideas around that, but I think just to head you off, I haven't been able to get anybody to sign off on that idea.
In New Zealand, where some crazed architect decided to build a house on the side of literally a cliff face.
Yeah.
He did just that as an overhand design thing. and he actually screw piled into the clip base and hung the house off the cliff with the screw piles.
Right. And so what? Yeah. So that was what?
And they had to test. What was it? I'm just trying to think of it. It literally was hung off the side of the cliff, and they had to test the pull-out factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before they were allowed to actually hang and kick off these things. But it went back, you know, into rock.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing. Yeah, I mean, why you do it in Australia.
Well, actually, screw piles do get used a bit, but typically they're used for all sorts of reasons. But there was one place built on Kangaroo Island in a environmentally sensitive area where they, instead of doing all this, all this sort of stuff, benching the site, all that sort of stuff, and augering piers and things like that, just drove screw piles down, and then timber floor on top of that, and then build with absolute minimal disturbance to the site. And then it also gives you that option of disassembling everything, unscrewing the screw piles, taking them away, and there's been very little damage to a site in that process. So yeah, beyond yeah, beyond that, there's a few different uses for screw piles and so on. With the really big tanks, really big water tanks that I'm still doing it a little bit, bits and bobs. But with the really tall ones, really large capacity ones, we use screw piles for anchoring them down into the ground as well. But they're much smaller screw piles than what you use on a normal house as well. Then after our slab, so our slab has cured for a bit and it's gotten hard enough for us to confidently work on top of that. Then we've got our first fix framing. So a couple of different forms of framing here. So this is our standard sort of studs at 600 centers type framing. This one's, well, it's a, I don't even know what the term for that one is, but that's where you've got plywood bracing that actually creates essentially a series of composite. So whenever you bring two things together, so we've got some composite framing there. With that to enable significant spans and rigid frames, and then our steel framing down here. Well, light gauge steel framing, which as opposed to hot rolled steel framing. Within here, what have we got? So we've got some light gauge, fairly standard light gauge steel framing happening there. This one is what we call a conventionally pitched roof. This bit right here, that's a gable end. So where you've got a triangle right at the end, that's a gable end. Or actually, triangle at the end, it's gable end. Where you've got a sloping end like that, it's called a hip end. And we will go through how to form up hips and so on in various different scenarios. So that's a hip formed in a conventionally pitched framing fashion. This one here is a trussed roof, but it's got a conventionally pitched hip end. And this one, well, I guess we call it conventionally pitched framing as well, except that's a very how to say it, a very simple example of such. So that's what's called a Tudor frontage. So Tudor, like very high pitched how to say it, gable at the end. But this one's not your standard way of doing conventionally pitched. In that what they've gone for is thicker rafters. So they've gone for thicker rafters without any intermediate support. Then, following our framing, plumbing, plumber first fix, and data electrical etc.
Are people still thinking about putting data cabling in? I mean, we've
I
got
don't know.
one now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm struggling with that one. Whether to whack ether cables in or just do everything for one.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it all depends on how well your routers are going to work, but then you can have little repeaters around the place as well.
Well, our house was built in 2000.
Yeah.
And all the data cabling went to every room except for the computer room. I don't know how that worked.
Yeah, my guess is it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So, yeah. That's a good question because I'm not detailing up those. Yeah. Then following our at that same time, get our roof plumbing in, gutters, etc. And brickwork happening. Roof covering happening. So various different forms of roof. So here we've got concrete tiles. Those ones probably look like concrete tiles as well, but they may be maybe terracotta tiling. Not sure what type of tiling is going on here. But then this is a form of metal decking sheet roof. So our sheet roofs come in many different profiles. So the way that it's rolled, the way it's shaped is called a profile. Actually, and that's that's a little bit unusual. No, we don't have any other roofing shots. So certainly with our tiles, we've got our tile battens there at 330 centres. But typically with your sheet roofing, you have much larger, those ones look like even less than 600 centres. You have much larger spacing for your battens or your purlins underneath your sheeting. A typical these two purlins right at the end are typically close together, about around that 900 millimeters, and then in between that is 1200 millimeter centres. So that's a bit of an odd example.
Say far north Queensland, where they've got to have more.
More tie down.
More tie down.
That may well be it. Yeah. That's an important thing, because that's the only way you can get the tie down into your sheeting is to
That's why I said 600 because I know we're going to use 600 tie downs on our roof.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah.
It's the N4.
Yeah. Yeah, because you've got wind coming straight off the clear ocean, off that flat bit, then hitting the hill. Yeah, but that is an important consideration. So typically, with your roof sheeting manufacturers, they give you tables of spans of your sheeting, but then so your purlin spans, but then your purlin spans may differ from that because of the tie down requirements. So in Doug's case, they differ from that, and I've had it. I was asked to design a curved roof using for pergola using Danpolon, which is a core flute. It's a thick core flute material that allows light through, but stops ultraviolet light. So it stops your UV coming through. It's a fantastic product, but turns out we couldn't actually do that roof as initially designed because there wasn't the capacity to have enough tie downs happening for that covering. Because with Danpolon you can only tie down at the seams. That's the only ffixing points, and maybe we can have a look at that Danpolon sheeting another time. But you've got limited option for putting tie downs. You can't go screwing through it at all like you can with a roof sheet, and without intermediate purlins through, couldn't get the tie downs for it. So although we can span very long distances with the Danpolon, can't actually tie it down adequately to meet the wind requirements. So yeah, it's a very important consideration in that designing. so following our roof covering, so now that it's nice and dry, we can start getting some insulation in, and we can get some wall and ceiling linings in. We certainly don't want to be doing any of this sort of stuff without a roof on, because if you get rain on that, well then that's sort of, well, it's game over for your internal linings. You've got to pull them all out. Then second fix carpentry, so all your skirtings and architraves, etc. And then cupboards, appliances. Floor and wall tiling. Follow on. This is our waterproofing that somebody mentioned earlier on. So various different ways of going about waterproofing. So waterproofing is incredibly important. I think a big chunk of damage that happens to buildings happens because of moisture, and this is an incredibly important step. That is done adequately. Now, there's two main ways of doing your waterproofing. One is to waterproof on top of the slab set down that was done for the bathroom, and I'll just quickly talk about that slab set down bit as well. So with your floor slab, so we've got a floor slab like this. But then we want to ensure that water from our bathroom, our wet areas, isn't going into the rest of our house. So when we're pouring that slab, we'll use little bits of timber here like this, so a little piece of timber, to ensure that piece of slab for our bathroom is 50 millimetres lower. So, typically you get this set down area first, and then you're pouring the rest. But then what we end up with is a floor which is down lower, and then part of the first fix before the slab goes in, they're going to have pipes, and they'll be a bit longer than what's required, etc. Because that'll all be trimmed off later. But then following that set down, we don't just tile straight on top of that thing and then have a 50 millimetre step when you walk into your bathroom. What goes on top of that is a screed, a mortar bed. It's basically it's a flat concrete without your really big piece of aggregate in it. So something that can be troweled and nicely finished to a very even slope. And there are slope relationships set out in the National Construction Code for that as well. So that slopes to our floor trap. And those slopes can be designed in various different ways. But then also our screed will be slightly lower than our slab, because we're going to have sort of 6 millimetres or so for our tiles, and then our tiles go on top of that. Now, the two different ways of doing the waterproofing, one of them is that you can waterproof underneath your screed, and then you have, I think it's puddle flange in here, like that takes all of that water. Or you can get your screed down and then you waterproof on top of your screed, and then you have your floor trap fitting on that, and so you turn your waterproofing down inside. Several different ways of approaching that. My preference is for the waterproofing on top of the screed, because with your waterproofing under your screed, yes, you may have got that, you've got that set down very nice and so on, but you do still get the retention of some moisture within that screed. I prefer the waterproofing on top and then turned down into your waste, like that. But yeah, two different approaches, and that can play into your scheduling as well, because we have to give time for that waterproofing to dry, and certainly give time to dry before we go putting a screed on it or work on it with tiles.
In the concreters?
No, I don't actually know whether typically waterproofers are tilers as well, but I don't know who's going to.
So my boyfriend is Tara.
Yeah.
He doing the people time.
Right, so he does the screed, but he does the waterproofing.
The waterproofing, the people the type.
Yeah.
So the last
Oh, and he does the waterproofing on top of the screed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he does tiling, but he also does waterproofing as well.
He do
Yeah.
waterproofing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So he said that when you waterproofing like this,
Yes.
the first one
Yes.
is like a USA American style,
Yeah.
and in Australia you're
Do it on top of the screen. Yeah. Yeah. And that's my understanding as well. Yeah. So that's so our waterproofing and our tiling goes in. Then following that, our plumbing second fix, or final fix for plumbing, all our baths, showers, all that sort of thing. But things can differ. If we've got a preformed shower base, they they can go in a little bit later. Or if we're not doing a preformed shower base, then all of that, the hob, etc., the little piece. So in our floor, doing our shower, if we're going to be tiling up around that, then there has to be a hob material that we tile over, etc., for forming up our shower. And there, that can impact on what's happening when with our tiling as well. And then finally painting. Second fix electrical, so putting on all the switches, etc., and light fittings. So it has to happen after our painting, so we get a lovely finish. So we're not trying to paint around switches and things like that. And then if we're doing site works at this point in time, or some people don't, or actually many contracts they won't have the landscaping that won't be part of the contract. They'll do that after handover, and then cleaning up. So I think we did fairly well. Really with our hive mind scheduling on that. Also, because today's lecture because the scheduling is a short lecture, we've tacked on occupational health and safety onto the end of today as well. And an important consideration in that, I'll go flick over to this. Does anybody know of or has heard of the Grenfell Tower? Everybody? So in the UK. So it's basically, we won't go through the whole article, but here you see 17 people confirmed dead. So a hugely destructive fire. Is anybody able to enlighten me on how that or why it was such a destructive fire?
Didn't it have something to do with like the air conditioning or something? That was.
no, wasn't the prison? The refrigerator?
Was that?
The refrigerator.
Well, that's how it started. It started with the refrigerator, but
Well, the whole thing was a chimney with a fire underneath it.
Yeah.
You could see it, the classic setup where guys would start big barbecues with wooden pallets.
No alarm. No alarm.
Yeah.
Like, they don't
No.
mention about.
Yeah, there might have been something. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. There's. Yeah.
Coating on the building wasn't a foam, it was a fire retardant foam and an outer casing of alloy that actually also enabled the fire while it was full on the bottom. It basically funneled it up.
Yeah.
I don't think, if the product was what they wanted, which was a Luca bomb, I don't think it would have made any difference. It would have just taken a little bit longer.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that as well.
It's amazing.
But yeah, oh god.
My builder wanted me to, instead of using people, to use foam with a cementous type structure on the outside.
Yeah.
And save my energy desire to help us bring us up to requirement.
Yes, yeah.
And I had two problems with it. Number one, home burns.
Mm.
Number two, it also can be compressed when old. That's it. So I sort of flicked it. But he's adamant that it wouldn't burn on a little gas torch. I've got it at home actually, the sample of the stuff he wants. I just went, and it started to burn.
Yeah.
I said, you electrical cable won't be coming in now.
Yeah, and that is, yeah, and that, so that, yeah, exactly. So that sort of plays into, so a major contributor to this is the way that the fire spreads. So as designers, we have to design each of these separate units have to have fire separation. So we've got to have fire separating walls between each. We've got to have fire separating floors between each. So if there's a fire in this one, it doesn't spread to the others. Obviously that did not have that, you know, obviously that fire spread happened through that whole thing, and it is, certainly it is a major issue with that form of cladding. So the type of cladding that was on there is two thin strips of aluminium with a polyethylene core in the centre. So it's a rigid material, but polyethylene is made, it's a byproduct from refining petrol. So it's a hydrocarbon, it's a highly flammable hydrocarbon. Now you've certainly got aluminium cladding systems that have fire retardants within that polyethylene, and they burn at different rates, etc. So as you said, you know, if they use the more expensive Aluka bond, it might have just taken a bit longer to burn. There's plenty of conjecture. I'm not going to weigh in exactly, or not really going to weigh into all those bits. But when you've got an aluminium sandwich panel cladding on the outside of a building, set off about sort of battened out about this sort of distance, and it's highly flammable, and you've created a chimney behind it that can just carry flames up, because as hot air rises, and anybody would have known that, like you've mentioned the barbecue with pallets, or somebody mentioned, you know, getting things, you know, happening with pallets. When you create that funnel in how to say it, in concert with a heat source, you get flames carried up very rapidly. And then, okay, so certain other failures and so on. Fridge went, and so who ends up being responsible for that? It's almost an impossible question to answer, but I think a fair bit of responsibility lands on the shoulders of the people who said to use that cladding. I think I can be fairly safe in saying that. That as designers, we do have to think about how, you know, what are going to be the safety impacts of the specification of products. Also, you mentioned the styrofoam substrate for render as well. So there's various different forms of styrofoam used as wall structure, and you know, famous one is one that's very popular now are structurally insulated panels. There are different types of foam infills, and they burn differently. I detail up a building after a fire. I think it was at Loxton, that was very early sort of idea of using structurally insulated panels, so freezer panels that had expanded polystyrene and then curved, then metal sheets either side. So it's this sandwich panel with polystyrene between. So that building caught fire. There's basically nothing left of it except lots of little sheets of metal on the ground, and some bits from a cooktop and all that sort of stuff. Incredibly intense fire. So I didn't see the fire, saw the aftermath. But we can have these things, and you mentioned you set a torch to yours. Now they're not designed to have a blowtorch put on them. It's designed as an entire system. So we've got a styrofoam. I'm running out of. Yeah, I'll get a new marker. So we've got got these thick sections of styrofoam with a bit of a mesh on the front of them to take a render. So thick portions of styrofoam like that, and then this mesh type covering on that, and then we'll get, let's say a 10 mil render on that, and then that render carries around the bottom. The thing is, and you mentioned golf balls, all sorts of impact damage, you can take a chunk out of that, and then you've got your styrofoam sitting there exposed to whatever fire source feature. So, I don't know, let's knock a corner off that, and then you have a fire, a barbecue or something that gets out of hand. That can quickly burn. It's certainly it's designed to be this complete system that's encased by a render, but things happen to renders, bits get chipped off, all that sort of stuff, and it's important for us to, as designers, to think about that. Think about the life, and Doug, you mentioned electrical cables as well. So you can got our render coating on there, and there's nothing on that side, that one. So yeah, so that yeah.
And I questioned it because I thought, well, hang on. It meant I'd get my energy maybe, but then I looked at it and thought, well, hang on, I've got to think of valve loading as well.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then I thought, well, if there was an ember attack coming out of the hill or anything, and something got in, away you go.
Yeah. Incredibly quick spread of fire, and so with nothing on the back there, and you've got your electrical cables here, and okay, they should be all installed correctly in junction boxes and things like that, but things happen with, actually, so working in repair and reinstatement stuff for buildings, one thing I did notice a bit of a flurry on, it was a few years back, is air conditioners, cheap air conditioners catching alight as well. So it might not be our standards of electrical fitting and so on. So we have very stringent standards around that in Australia. But if there are things assembled that are cheap and so on, and we get we put on an air conditioning system that ends up arcing and catching a light, that's a fantastic fire source for this sort of cladding as well. It's not just the electrical lines that are installed as part of the dwelling. So these are important things to consider as designers.
Sort of panel is that unlike a Grenfell Tower, this would lack air and oxygen to feed that fire.
It may lack air and oxygen to feed the fire, or it may not, because at the base of our wall, we're still going to have weep holes. We're still going to have to ensure that water gets out of there somehow. So let's say we've got our slab here like that sticks out from our slab, and we've got our timber framing here, and then if it goes up, we've got battens for fixing it, etc. And then like a small flashing detail on that. But we're still going to have to ensure that any little bits of water that do make their way in there get out of there, and that means air can get in.
I don't think there are too many cold rooms ever caught fire.
No.
There was a big one just recently, wasn't there, at Murray Bridge?
Oh yes, at the meatworks. Yeah.
The whole meatworks went up.
Yeah.
Well, that was more than a fire. I think because the cold rooms, I think the gas that they used, that's where it became the big issue. It's very flammable.
Yeah.
There was a huge one in New Zealand as well, all because of the gas.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I use it.
But that place that Lox and I spoke about earlier, that was made of refrigeration panels. So the same stuff you make cool rooms out of, bits of metal and styrofoam. But yeah, you've got to have possibly at least a little bit of an air source there as well. And certainly once things start breaking away and you can get more of an air source, well then things can spread quicker. So it is incumbent upon us as designers to think about those things, because there might be people that are killed or harmed or so simply through specification of products. Other things that we have to think about is, I guess, essentially the life cycle of what we're designing as well. I don't know. We can design some heavy elements into things and so on that that are supported for a certain time. But if there's weathering, there's damage and things like that, do these things then become unstable and unsafe as well? And then there's also the installation of things as well. We have to ensure that things it's actually possible to install them in a safe fashion as well. Can't think of anything off the top of my head as to a scenario of specifying something that can't be installed in a safe way, but it is incumbent upon us. Can anybody think of something that if you specify it in a certain way, you couldn't possibly install it in a safe fashion?
Anything that puts out a naked flame, gas heaters would most probably be the most dangerous thing, because there's actually a naked flame. There's no real safe way to install that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be, and that's giving me another idea as well. Combustion heaters as well. So certainly I've had at least 2 jobs I can think of off the top. Yeah, 3 I can think of where installation of combustion heaters has gone wrong as well and caused fires in a building.
Yeah, the fluids going through the roof scare me.
Yeah, as they should, because they get incredibly hot. It's about so there are Australian standards in relation to how they should be installed, and there's advice in the National Construction Code as to minimum standards and shielding behind combustion heaters and fireproof materials such as fibre cement sheet for wood heaters that are a certain distance from walls and things. It's all set out. It's important that those things are followed, because fires and rooftops and so on. Yeah. And one of them was even in this firebox type setup. Yep.
The heater that I'm getting is one of those fancy ones. And then the engineer actually said, okay, because it's a suspended combustion heater.
Right. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
had to, for that corner of the roof that's going in, we had to get them to engineer for that quarter part of the roof.
Yeah.
And we had to have setback from the glass. It was 600.
Okay.
600 from the glass.
Yeah.
So that we didn't explode the windows.
Mm. Yeah.
So it's just safety.
The kitchen exhaust fans underneath an open fire, full of soaked up oil in their filters, sucking air into the roof.
And putting a whole lot of flammable oils and things like that in your roof as well, that can end up being a fire source feature. Another thing I just sort of, so it's quite a while ago now, but I don't know who the anchor tenant is in this building now. It's that big black building on Grenfell Street in the city that's got a sunken sort of paved area. It's not really a garden, but a paved area around it with a bit of a waterfall thing on the side. Jones Lang LaSalle used to be. What's that?
That's how Grenfell's.
It's
called that.
Is it? Is that?
It is.
Oh, right.
It was actually called the Grenfell Tower when it was built.
Right.
It had the glass, a glass issue where glass panels were falling off it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So another scenario. Yes, it was pushing the envelope, cutting edge design for its time. But big, thick panels of glass were falling off of it and crashing onto the street. In wind, incredibly dangerous sort of thing. There's
Oh shit. you talk about that, I happened to be at Samri during the last
Yeah,
week,
yeah.
and then I walked next door into UniSA. They've got their what do you call it?
Medical research.
Medical research thing.
Yeah.
And facing Samri on this end, the whole wall is glass going down. There's a stairway that goes from top to
Yeah.
bottom. Okay. I happen to be up on the top floor, and you can walk up to the glass and sort of look down to the road.
Yeah.
I could not see, other than the plastic bead, what was holding glass panelling. It would have been two of those, the entire panel.
Yeah.
And all I could see, and even when I went outside, I went, well, I didn't lean on that because I couldn't actually see what was holding the glass panelling other than the rubber bead.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that building specifically. There. I think this is kind of. I like it. Right. It's a bit magical. Silicon. Structural silicon glazing. That's probably what it was. Where you use a bead, like a thick section of silicon, and the glass is stuck on
So that they,
with that. Yeah.
so I could not reliably see anything other than the plastic bead there. Like extra.
That's what would have been used between those panels, as well. It actually comes in a roll, and they unroll it.
The Luca bond,
yeah.
or the sandwich panel.
And it looks a nice thing because it's just a nice clear black finish, and it goes between the gaps.
Yeah, yeah. It's got a mastic infill. Yeah, maybe look, we might get a chance to take a walk around the campus here as well and show you some more, how to say it, commercial claddings, because all this is sort of making its way into residential anyhow. I think probably it's a good idea if we do that at some point as well. Because some of those details you're talking about with the mastic in between aluminium sandwich panel cladding, that's been done on a few buildings out here. But yes, you can also, for some of these commercial, we call it curtain wall glazing systems, use structural silicon as well for sticking glass on, and they have to be cut off. So it's not a mechanical fixing as such. But yes, so many instances of things of design going wrong and endangering people, and what is it? The Safe Work SA site. Safe Work SA site has got a section on there. It's a bit of a running commentary, essentially, of injuries and incidents that are happening on sites as well. And so maybe that's some good insight into the effects of design and what people on site end up having to do, etc. Another important thing, stair design. So I think I've mentioned that to you guys before, haven't I? Design of stairs, etc. Also very, very important to get right from a safety perspective. So grab the other. It's on. So Safe Work SA. So they are the people that ensure that, well, they help to ensure the body that regulate and police the assurance of safety on construction sites and also for various different professional activities. So under Work Health and Safety Act of 2012, a person conducting a business or undertaking, e.g. a company, self-employed person, each partner, blah, 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 and the government department has a primary duty of care to ensure workers, contractors and others are not exposed to risk to their health and safety as a result of work activities. So that includes you as designers or anybody who's employing anybody. So you have workers you have engaged or caused to be engaged. So that might be on the advice of you're saying, well, this is how we, this is how we go about doing this thing. You have to install this lift shaft in this particular fashion, etc. Or workers carrying out work who are directed by you or can influence other persons that may be affected by the work you carry out, e.g. visitors and the public. So the public, Grenfell Tower number 2, etc. So our responsibility as designers extends off into the future. So it's important that we are aware of any of the aspects of our influence.
Does
on
at
that.
any time that come to an end? Like, when a building's 100 years old, is the designer still like it?
That is actually a very good point. So,
I don't care.
yeah.
Right.
So
Once the
typically,
building becomes
yeah.
old,
Yeah, no, that is a really good point, and certainly as the building becomes old, there are other factors that come into play that may not,
The maintenance of the building,
Yeah.
is there, and look at the thing that happened overseas with that bridge collapse.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
designer and the engineer designed it for a specified period of time, for a specified amount of load on it. I was reading about this last night, and yet they didn't realise that it was going to get 25 million cars over a year, and trucks load.
Yeah.
How would they know that when they were designing that bridge? Yeah. But I suppose we don't know everything yet. But reading what I read last night, they are already in a maintenance factor, and that's partially what caused the bridge to collapse. They think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, it was cheaper to try and maintain it than put it down and put another one up.
Yeah. That was fit for purpose.
It was fit for purpose,
Yeah.
and also the amount of load that it took.
And so, and look, I'm not going to play a judge or anything, but I think if you consider those circumstances, it's really not the designers at fault in that scenario, because they've designed for a particular purpose, and if the people that use the local authority that enable the use of that bridge for more than what it was designed for, essentially they're the ones that are liable. So yes, there is some attenuation of liability with other various different factors that come into play, and even with new stuff like Grenfell Tower, recently clad, there are many different factors that come into play. But in regards to that time period, so builders have a there's a live, I forget what the term is, but there's the builder's liability period, which is typically for 10 years, and with your building design insurance, you have to carry that. Well, typically you carry that through for 10 years after you finish work as well. So you pay for that insurance, but then you carry that insurance through for another 10 years after to cover you. Possibly that's an indication, but beyond that, it's a really good question.
So, it's pretty logical that, if something like this, I bet the bridge designers are filing bankruptcy papers now.
Maybe not. But if they had it specified that these are the particular loads and the consistency of load, and this is what this bridge is designed to do, and what it can do, and its lifespan. If they had that set out, and then the people who contracted them to do that work and ultimately used that infrastructure went beyond that.
So I think it's similar to the Sydney Harbour and the Golden Gate.
Mm-hmm.
So they have that much more traffic. They've actually put lanes below it, the other lanes. So instead of having a single lane, I don't know, maybe they got 3 or 4 lanes of traffic. So the load of it is actually quadruple.
Mm.
It wasn't ever designed like in the old days. I think they designed with a much greater safety factor than we do today.
Yeah, can be.
We just go worry about the cost. In those days, labour and materials weren't that expensive.
Yeah. But on that liability, so you're adding several different lanes of things, changing loads. That's going to have to be re-engineered, and so engineers are going to have to assess that structure and go, can this work be done? Can that initial work be done? So, yes, as designers, we can't design for eventualities for which there is no control over into the future. If somebody decides to cut a hole through one of our floor joists that we specified to do something, that's certainly not the designer's responsibility, but certainly we have that responsibility to design our unadulterated, our unaffected design that doesn't cause harm to other people. So I'm thinking, like specifying cladding, things like that. If it's used as per specified and people die as a result, then there's liability onto us as designers. So also general office type stuff, or if anybody's going on to doing site supervising work or also work on site, so provide and maintain a work environment without risks to health and safety. So stacks of risks to health and safety on construction sites, and very big potential for that. And a really hot thing around that is also just about keeping sites clean and tidy. No trip hazards and things. Caps on top of starter bars. So starter bars, they're the bits of reinforcing that stick up out of concrete for where we're going to be attaching other reinforced concrete or reinforced elements to. Putting caps on the top of star droppers as well, because they, horrible injuries can come from that. Provide and maintain safe plant, equipment, and structures. So, for all you're probably not going to be involved with on-site plant, telehandlers and skid steers and all that sort of excavators and whatnot. That's going to be your earthworks contractors. But if that is you, they have to be safe. Provide and maintain safe systems of work. Can anybody think of just in office type? So think about a drafting office. What sort of risks, health and safety risks, do we have in the drafting office?
I think we had this set up with graphic designers, and they had to have a 5-minute break every hour to stretch.
Yeah. The ergonomics around workplaces and ensuring. Now, I guess, I know it doesn't. Well, certainly in any offices I've worked in, I haven't had people come around and tell me, "Hey, Mike, you've been sitting there for too long. I'll get up and move." But it's important that if I have I understand that it's important thing for me to have a standing desk or something like that. If I go to my employer and say, "Oh, look, this desk that I've got with this really bad chair and so on, it's really bad for me. I need to have a standing desk. I need to have this sort of stuff." It's your responsibility as the employer to listen to those things and provide that infrastructure. Particularly if you've got people who are going to be working drafting for 8 hours a day, to be able to have the facilities to ensure that their health and safety is looked after, because there is a lot of back injury and so on that happens from just the sedentary nature of some of these things that happen around design, and it is very important for you to think about that just for your own health and safety as well, and your posture and whatnot, and getting up all the time. And previously, in a lot of offices, you'd be getting up a lot because you're printing stuff off. Now, if you're just putting things to PDFs and so on and sending them off, you're not getting out of your chair as much for that anymore either. And so, keep changing your position. Think about incorporating some exercise and movement and so on into your daily routine. Safe use, handling and storage of plant structures and substances. So, yeah, so one thing I can think of, there are, yeah, I don't know, you see it on grand designs all the time, the moving of giant glass panels. It seems to be a thing, you know, in their project. It comes to, okay, we're installing this giant glass panel, there's a dozen people moving this thing. You've got to think about those weights of stuff, how stuff can be brought into site, how many people it's going to require to be lifting these things, and are you going to have any injuries, back injuries and whatnot happening because you know, because you've had a limited number of people have to move these really heavy things, or things in you know, increments of 40 kilograms. Yeah. You know, possibly issues around you know, roof sheeting and things like that. If you so there's one, I was thinking of one grand design thing I saw in I can't remember where it was, might have been New Zealand, something like that. It was a really difficult site to access, and yet the architect had specified these really long roof sheets, like 15-metre long roof sheets or something, some crazy length of roof sheets they had to carry up through this forest and then feed onto this house. You know, incredibly difficult and dangerous at the best of times, you know, with no wind. You know, add a little bit of wind to that, and it'd be an absolute nightmare. Certainly safety around that is, you know, or should the architect take a little bit of responsibility for if things go wrong in that instance? You know, court might decide yes. Yeah, provide any information, training, instruction, or supervision that is necessary to protect any persons from risk to their health and safety. That's a really good thing about temporary fencing around sites as well. It's this barrier to say this is where the site starts. People without their white cards, without hard hats, boots, etc., general members of the public kicking balls and whatever, can't come in here past this point. It's also a really good place for hanging up signage to say, come on site, you need these sort of things as well. So, you're entertaining that the health of workers and the conditions of the workplace are monitored for the purpose of preventing illness or injury to workers arising from the conduct of your business. That can be things like having workplace health and safety meetings every now and again to ensure that there are adequate practices in place. Things like if people are required to drive between Adelaide and Melbourne and whatnot, that they're not doing the whole stint, you know, in one stop, they rest every 2 hours. Things like that, deciding on those workplace practices. So if you have a large office, I think it's more than 20 people. Actually, I won't go into that because I'm not sure, but I think there are requirements around that as well. Maintain any accommodation where provided, so not to expose a worker to risks to health and safety. So yeah, plenty of times I've worked out in very remote sites where you know, the nearest homestead would be, you know, 50 to 80 kilometres away from where I'm working. Yeah, you stay out there because if you know it's going to be hours driving back to the things. It's important for people, contracting people, to ensure that they have either that sort of setup for themselves for staying out and so on, or that those facilities are provided in a safe fashion as well. Where a person has a duty to ensure health and safety, they're required to eliminate risks so far as is reasonably practicable. So, sort of, you know, how long is this string type thing? But it's, you know, I guess it comes down to what you would want to stand up in court and advocate for. You know, if you had to defend yourself in front of a fairly voracious lawyer, would you feel comfortable doing that with your case? If this is not possible, minimise risks so far as is reasonably practicable. So once again, a fairly broad statement, open to interpretation, but you've got to ask yourself, am I providing the right environment? So health and safety duties are not transferable, therefore these duties cannot be contracted out to another party. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure exactly how that relates, because you certainly do have OHS departments and whatnot. But that's the bolts of it in terms of what we have to think about as designers and employers of other people, and certainly also as your duty as employers or employees, you have duty of care to your co-workers, so you're not to endanger the risk of other people, and you are to observe the workplace health and safety measures that are set out for you to follow as well. So I'll finish that. I'd better also take